Some need wheels to get around, and some can use our feet. Some eat only vegetables, and some of us eat meat. Some need to be sober, and some can drink a beer. We are all welcome here. Some of us are brown, and some of us are white. Some wake up real early, and some prefer the night. Some of us wear burqas, some wear headphones in our ears. We are all welcome here. We are all welcome here. Let's fight with every ounce of love to end the senseless fear. We are all welcome here. Some of us are northern, and some are from the south. Some of us believe in God, and some of us have doubt. Some of us are straight, some are trans, and some are queer. We are all welcome here. Some of us were slaves, and some of us were not. Some remember history, it seems that some forgot. When we choose to hate each other, I fear the end is near. We are all welcome here. Home of the brave, land of the free. Doesn't that mean you? Doesn't that mean me? Doesn't that mean none? Doesn't that mean all? Never thought it ever meant the building of a wall. We are all welcome here. We are all welcome here. We are all welcome here.
And you are all welcome here. Welcome and Shabbat Shalom. Tonight we are marking Refugee Shabbat. There are now estimated to be more than 84 million people who've been forcibly displaced due to persecution and violence. Over 26 million of these people are refugees. Most of the remainder are internally displaced within the borders of their own countries. And of course, in just the past 2 weeks, another 2 million Ukrainians have become refugees as well. 68% of the world's refugees come from just 5 countries: Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Myanmar. Why should we as Jews care about this? Well, we'll soon be celebrating Passover. And during the Seder, we're told in every generation, a person is obligated to see themselves as though they came forth out of Egypt. We were slaves in Egypt, and we've been subject to persecution throughout much of our history. We know what it's like to be forced to flee and to lose our home. And of course, the Torah states 36 times, you shall love the stranger. According to the great sage Maimonides, the Holy One commanded that we should love the stranger just as God commanded that we should love the divine. As it is written, and you shall love Adonai your God. The Holy One loves the stranger, as it is written, and God loves the stranger. And now, You're Strangers, a song by Pilar and Moore, or Plylar and Moore.
gave you the light, warms you and surrounds. You walk from here to there. Who gave you the ground? Who gave you the stars to wish upon and dream? You aim your ship and sail. Who gave you the sea? Once you were afraid, a stranger in the town. Who gave you your hope? Who is calling now? ואהבתם את הגר, כי גרים הייתם. ואהבתם את הגר, כי גרים הייתם. Love the stranger, you were strangers. Love the stranger, you were strangers. Who gave you the breath that lifts your voice to sing? You fall and rise again. Who gave you the wings? They're just beyond the wall. They fall upon the shore. We can hear them knock. Who gave us the door? ואהבתם את הגר, כי גרים הייתם. ואהבתם את הגר, כי גרים הייתם. Love the stranger, you were strangers. Love the stranger, you were strangers. How easy it can be to let the fear take hold. You were once set free, remember we were told. Love the stranger, you were strangers. 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 ואהבתם את הגר, כי גרים הייתם. ואהבתם את הגר, כי גרים הייתם.
And to light our candles, Gina Maduro and Lynn Yarmoff will light the candles for us, page 120 in the fat book and 2 in the thin book.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Asher Kitshana B'Mitzvotav, B'Tzivana Lahadlik Nersha Shabbat.
So before we continue with the Kiddush, I want to read a prayer. We lift this cup with words, remembering our ancestors' exodus from Egypt on our lips. Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim. As we recall that ancient journey from slavery to freedom, we think also of the many times throughout history that our people have wandered in search of safety. From Tsarist Russia to the horrors of the Holocaust, to persecution in Iran, the former Soviet Union, Cuba, Ethiopia, and beyond. Time and again, we have found ourselves forced out of our homelands for being who we are. But each time we were held together by community and assisted by those who risked their safety in protection of ours. We continue to survive against all odds as our hearts grew to hold others who would come to experience what we had. We fill our Kiddush cup to overflowing, hoping that the joy of Shabbat will spread into the week to come. May our commitment to welcome fill everyone as this Kiddush cup does, leading us to take bold action in support of refugees and asylum seekers from every corner of the earth. We lift this cup with the words remembering the ingenuity of creation on our lips. Zikaron l'ma'aseh v'reishit. We continue creating and repairing the world as we build our communities on the collective strength of each individual, remembering that we are stronger and strongest when we come together.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon chinkilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reshit, ki hu yom techila lemikra kodesh, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim, kivanu v'acharta, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodshecha, be'ahava uvratzon chinkaltanu, baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen.
So Rabbi Jonathan Sacks writes, I used to think that the most important line in the Bible was, love your neighbor as yourself. Then I realized that it's easy to love your neighbor because he or she is usually quite like yourself. What is hard to love is the stranger, one whose color, culture, or creed is different from yours. That is why the command is love the stranger because you were once strangers. It resonates so often throughout the Bible. It is summoning us now. L'chadodi. Wait, let me get one.
Lecha lecha dodi, likrat likrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, likrat likrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. La 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 lecha dodi, likrat likrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha lecha dodi, likrat likrat kala, penei penei Shabbat nekabela. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל עמי אחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה, לה 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 לך דודי, לקראת לקראת קלה, פני פני שבת נקבלה. לך לך דודי, לקראת לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה מראש מקדם משוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לה 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 לחדותי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לחדותי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה קומי צעיר מתוך ההפכה רב לך שבט בעמק הבקע והוא יחמול עלייך לה 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 לחדותי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לחדותי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה. We can stand and welcome the Sabbath bride. All right. I forgot to remind. Boi v'shalom ateret ba'ala גם בשמחה ובצהלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי כלה לחדותי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לחדותי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לה לה לחדותי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לחדותי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה.
May be seated. So last week, we finished the book of Exodus, and the Torah portion was Pekudei. And the portion describes the completion of the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary that we took through the desert. And it seems particularly relevant to our theme tonight. As Rabbi Michael Strassfeld points out, the phrase used to describe the building campaign calls on people to give Asher Yidvenu Libo, whose heart so moves him. This ability is the mark of a free person. It's not just that the person is not a slave forced to work, and it's not just that the person owns things and can decide to give them away. It is the very definition of freedom, to give as your heart wishes to give. As Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch explains, Nadiv, one who is generous, is one whose actions arise solely from the dictates of his own inner self, free, independent. This voluntary nature of the action is quite specially stressed. Any and every compelling influence, or even any exterior directing influence, is definitely excluded. Even at the moment of bringing it, the bringer is to be generous of heart. He is still to be completely master over his decision. May we too be generous of heart as we become aware of those whose lives have been upended by war, persecution, economic distress, or climate change. The Chatzi Kaddish is page 263 if you have the fat book, and 145 if you have the thin book.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמרבה בעלמא תברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי בהיכון וביום איכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ויהי ברוח אמן יהי שמרבה מברך ועלם מול עלמי עלמיה יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי דקודשה, אלא ולעילא עם כל ברכתה ושירתה. תושבחתה ונחמתה דרן בעלמה, תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה. ויאמרו אמן.
So this is page 149 in the Fat Book and 31 in the Thin Book. This is an hour of change. Within it, we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it, we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over?
Ya la la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la. Baruchu et Adonai Hamevorach, Baruch Adonai Hamvorach, Le'olam va'ed, Le'olam, 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 Le'olam va'ed. Ya la la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la.
Please be seated and turn to page 337 in the Fat Book, 219 in the Thin Book. Prayer is not purely an act. All things pray, and all things pour forth their souls. The heavens pray, the earth prays, every creature and every living thing. In all life there is longing. Creation is itself but a longing, a kind of prayer to the Almighty. What are the clouds, the rising and the setting of the sun, the soft radiance of the moon and the gentleness of the night? What are the flashes of the human mind and the storms of the human heart? They are all prayers, the wordless outpouring of boundless longing for God. Page 266 and 148, Ahavat Olam, God's eternal love for us.
Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amecha ahavta, Amcha ahavta. Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otam 하늘이 말했다. אלוקינו אדוני אלוהינו בשוכבנו וקומנו נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נגה יומם ולילה נגה יומם ולילה ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. אוהב עמו
Please rise for the Shema on the next page.
I won't tell you that God loves me. I won't tell you that God saved my life. But I can say as loud and clear as I can sing from my lips to your ears that there's one of our God in every one of our lives. That's why we sing Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And that's why we sing Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And that's why we sing. I won't tell you God controls my life. I won't tell you that to have God's love would be my everlasting plight. But I can say as loud and clear as I can sing from my lips to your ears that there's one of our God, our Ner Tamid, our everlasting light. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And that's why we sing Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And that's why we sing Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
be seated, and Carol Lee, would you please lead us in the Ve'ahavta, page 268 and 150.
That's nice.
Okay, everybody, please join me. You too. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha V'shinantam lefanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlechtecha v'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha ug'shartam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beinenecha Uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha laman tiskaru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'item kadoshim lelohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem Me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem lelohim, ani Adonai Elohechem.
So in 2020, which is the last year that we have concrete data, only a little over 34,000 refugees were resettled globally. 34,000. I mentioned before we have about 84 or 5 million who are displaced. That is just about 1/3 the number resettled in 2019. Now, the US used to lead the world in terms of resettlement. However, because the US has decreased the number of refugees it resettles by more than 80%, it has contributed significantly to lowering the number of refugees resettled worldwide in the past few years. Now, refugees are the most vetted individuals entering the US because they undergo complex security checks that are run by the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the State Department, the Department of Defense, the National Counterterrorism Center, and other US intelligence agencies. It can take between 18 and 24 months, and sometimes longer, from the time a refugee is referred to the time of arrival. National security experts have repeatedly said that refugee resettlement programs advances our national security interests. It's an important foreign policy tool, and it contributes to keeping our troops safe around the world. And once resettled, refugees not only contribute to their new communities economically, but they also play an active role in civic engagement. They participate in the labor force. They maintain a strong devotion to education. They purchase homes, and they become US citizens. So hopefully we can remember that we were slaves right before we sang the Michamocha as we went through the Sea of Reeds on dry land. Page 270 and 152.
Omi kamocha, Ba'elim Adonai, Omi kamocha, Medar ba'kodesh, Honor נורא תהילות, אוסף אלה, או נורא תהילות, אוסף אלה. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever had. Redemption songs, songs of freedom. Malechutecha, ra'u banecha, bokei hayam. לפני משה עוזר לי, ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? 'Cause all I ever had, redemption songs, these songs of freedom, redemption songs.
So as I said, we sang the Milchamocha when we were freed from slavery in Egypt. But as Rabbi Hilly Haber points out, there's a difference between freedom and liberation. She writes, as the book of Exodus closes, we read, "Thus was finished all the work of the Mishkan of the tent of meeting, and the children of Israel did according to all that Adonai commanded Moses, so they did." This statement conveys a sense of completion, the arrival at an endpoint of mission accomplished. Yet the last sentence of the book of Exodus gives us anything but closure. It is strikingly open-ended. It says, "For over the tabernacle, a cloud of Adonai rested by day, and fire would appear in it by night, in the view of all the house of Israel throughout their journeys." Though they are free from Egypt, the Israelites are still on the march, still on their journey. In fact, they are just beginning to live into the project of liberation. Liberation cannot end, for one thing, because the future continues to pose its own challenges. Liberation is a dynamic process. It demands ongoing revolution and perpetual innovation. In the Jewish story, the project of liberation begins when the Israelites leave Egypt and reimagine themselves and their purpose in partnership with God. The Exodus is an invitation for us to step into that eternal project, to hold our own vision for liberation alongside that of the generations who came before, and to carry forward God's blueprint for our world. May all refugees know liberation. V'shamru, our wonderful mitzvah to celebrate Shabbat, which is a day of rest and renewal.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. בני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי שת ימים עשה אדוני, עשה אדוני. את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לתורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
I got to compliment our tech folks tonight, Asher and Shia. It's not as obvious to you in the sanctuary since you're seeing the whole thing up there, but you did a nice swift fade yes, wave. You see Nick in the background helping them out with audio and stuff, but you guys did a beautiful dissolve from one camera to the other, and then they had both cameras up at the same time, which was really cool. Very nice. And then I thought maybe Jory was playing the piano and the guitar at the same time. Yeah. I thought I saw you do that. Then I thought, did I just imagine that? Okay, that's pretty swift too. Okay, thank you all of you for your incredible talents. We're going to continue with the tefillah, which begins on page 273 or 155, and we rise.
Adonai, Sefatai, Sefatai Tifta, Ufi Agid Tehilatecha. Adonai, Sefatai, Sefatai Tifta, Ufi Agid Tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor ve'Hanara El Elyon, Gomel Hasadim Tovim ve'Konei Hakol, ve'Zocher Hasdei Avot ve'Imahot, u'meivi Geula livnei v'neihem leman shemo be'ahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshia u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh hakol atah Rab le'Hoshia, Hamoshiv aruach u'moriv hagashem, Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechayeh hakol berachma רחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלע, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
We continue silently, and if you have a prayer book, we are going to page 282 or 164, and please be seated when you're done or when you need to.
Yeah, they're getting under the still like 10%.
We continue with Shalom Rav, a great peace. Page 282 and 164.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lekol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lekol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. V'tov be'enecha levarech et amcha Yisrael bechol et uvechol shah bishlomecha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Tasim leolam. Tasim leolam.
So we hope the pandemic is over. We're not sure. And I'd like to read a poem prayer about the pandemic. The spotlight on the missing has dimmed these days. More than 800,000 dead and 5 million ill. The fever spike of loss soars ever higher. Overwhelm has overtaken us. Of the bereaved, there is no counting. We have been served up an alphabet soup of unbearable bitterness, variant flavors, Delta and Omicron thick on our tongues. We measure our days by the grave distance of 6-foot spacing, masks that reveal our wary eyes, gauging the increasing, bewildering distance from the time when time stopped to the, quote, new normal that we do not recognize. We have learned adaptation and resilience. We have learned that it is possible to reimagine and reschedule everything but grief. May we find our way to Makom, the place where tears are seen, prayers are heard, and battered hearts find rest. And we think now of those in need of healing, whether of body, of mind, or spirit. We think of friends of congregants and families of congregants and congregants. Jonathan Davidson, Ben Henderson, Kara Gilman, Rabbi Steve Robbins, Gloria Mangus, Steve Lux, Leslie Ferris, Pamela Mangus, Johnny Sikat, Larry Miller, Martha Miller, Judy Richmond, Fernando Guerrero, Zach Frankenberg, Lita Mintz, Deanne Edwards, Mitch Edwards, Erica Edwards, Sam Leapman. And if you'd like to add a name, please do so in the chat. Okay, I didn't mute anybody. Okay, anyway, Ruth Barrett, Judy, I have to use this, sorry. Ruth Barrett, Judy Cohen, Patty Podnar, Diana Anderson, Emmy Levine, Amy Morton, Les Hughes, Saul Eppelbaum, Stephanie Simons, anybody else? Anybody here?
Sylvia Prozin.
And anybody else now? All right, please join us in the Misha Berach, the prayer for healing, which, if you have the prayer book, is on the inside cover of your prayer book.
Misha Berach Avoteinu, Avraham, Yitzhak veYaakov. Misha Berach Imotenu, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, veRachel. May the one who blessed our mothers.
He doesn't.
We'll try it.
I did.
May the one who blessed our fathers hear our prayer. Hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer.
Better do it at the same time and hold it down, Robbie.
Bless us as well.
Command, shift,
Bless
A.
us with the power of your
Nothing
healing.
happened.
Bless us with the
Do that again.
power of your hope.
In other words,
may our
that,
hearts be filled with
Says Sandy, mute yourself.
understanding
Okay, I'll mute myself.
and strengthened by the power of your love. Bless us with a vision for tomorrow. Help us to reach out to those in pain. May the warmth of friendship ease our sorrow. Give us courage, give us faith, show us the way. Misha Berach Avoteinu, Misha Berach Imotenu. Hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer. Hear our prayer and bless us as well. Hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer, hear our prayer and bless us as well.
So in a few minutes, I'm going to divide up the people on Zoom into breakout groups, and then
Now watch the message,
folks
see if it
here
comes
will
up.
be able to also engage in some conversation. And what I want to talk about is Israel.
It came up and then it,
Israel's always had two contradictory goals. One is to be a state for Jews, and the other is to be a democracy. And in many ways, those are contradictory goals, because if it's a state for Jews, then you're giving preference, at least to the Jewish story, to Jewish symbols, to the Jewish calendar. And then also, you have an issue about demography, right? How many people who are not Jewish should be part of the state before it's no longer a state for Jews? So we'll get back to that question, but I want to give you a little background as it relates to what's going on right now in Ukraine. So since the beginning of this horrible humanitarian disaster that's been going on in Ukraine, there's been a lot of attention paid to Israel's role, both within and without. And there's been a careful dance on the part of the Israeli government expressing support for Ukraine, but without enraging Putin. I mean, Israel has Russia right on the northern border because Russia is in Syria, right? So Israel cannot get Putin too angry because they need to be able to deal with Iran sending weaponry and stuff to Hezbollah. And so they need to stay in the good graces of Putin. On the other hand, of course, what's going on in Ukraine is so horrible that you can't not condemn it. So they're in this kind of really difficult position. And Naftali Bennett, the prime minister, has decided to play a kind of mediating role. But Israel rebuffed Volodymyr Zelensky's request to address the Knesset. So that's just, one aspect that we're not actually going to talk about, but that's sort of the strange place that Israel is in, Putin and Ukraine. But then the question is about the admission of Ukrainian refugees. That's been very controversial. So of course, Ukrainian Jews who are considered Jewish can, enter Israel and are automatically eligible for citizenship under the law of return. And all you need to do is have one Jewish grandparent. But what should Israel do about admitting people who are not Jewish and are not eligible for citizenship and have no connection to Israel? Or maybe they have some connection. What are we supposed to do about those seeking a safe haven who are not Jewish? And how should Israel balance its need to maintain the Jewish character of the state and its knowledge that we too are a nation of refugees who gathered here largely when no one else in the world would take us in? So that's the whole reason Israel was created, in large part, was so that we had a safe place to go. So what do we do about other people looking for a safe place? Now, there are two issues. So Israel is willing to accept 5,000 non-Jewish refugees fleeing the fighting in Ukraine. And that was announced by the Interior Minister, Ayelet Shaked, on Tuesday. And she added that about 20,000 Ukrainians who had been in the country before the war will not be deported right now. Now, according to certain journalists, a lot of these people are there legally and they have work permits, but there are some that are not there legally. They will not be deported. Well, by now, there are probably at least 4,000 people eligible for at least some sort of refugee status in Israel. So really, there's almost no room for one more person. Most of these people who are not Jewish have a relative or a friend in Israel who needs to basically take responsibility for them. There was a moment when they were charging something like $3,000 as a surety bond for anybody coming in that was not eligible for citizenship. That has been dropped because that was seen as really discriminatory against people who don't have money. And although it's interesting, I listened to a podcast with a lawyer who's been helping people who are refugees, and he said he's gotten all these phone calls for people offering to pay the $3,000 just to help people get in. The problem is, once you reach the 5,000 mark, it doesn't matter, you know, what relative you have, how much money you have, they won't let you get on a plane because they've reached the cap. And these are people who, for example, there's somebody, let's say in Israel, who has parents who live in Ukraine, or maybe a child or somebody living in Ukraine, and they are not going to be allowed to bring them over. So that's issue number one. Now, and then also the people coming in as refugees, the 5,000 are not, they're being given a visa, a tourist visa, so they can only stay for like 3 months. They can't get national health care and they can't take a job, which maybe doesn't sound so terrible, but you know, that puts a burden on the family in Israel who has to then pay for all these people to have health care and some way to live. After 3 months, it's not clear what's going to happen. Okay, the second issue, so one is just, you know, how many of these people should we be allowing in who are not Jewish and for how long, and how should we take care of them? And the other issue is a whole other story, which is who is a Jew. So the law right now is you can bring your family over with you if you are emigrating to Israel, if you have the right to make aliyah. If you have one Jewish grandparent, then you can bring the rest of your family, even if they don't have that status. So what's going on right now is you have men in Ukraine who are not allowed to leave, right? Anybody between 18 and 60 is not allowed to leave the country. They have to stay and fight, which means that if they send their spouses and their kids to Israel and they're allowed to come in for whatever reason, those families cannot bring their husband or their father or their son later, except for people who are considered Jewish. So they have decided that the only people allowed to do that are people who are halachically Jewish. In other words, a Jewish mother. Only if you have a Jewish mother and you come to Israel, can you then bring this man later. So that also skewers things, or skews them rather, but skewers them too. So it's really unclear how many of these people will be allowed to become citizens. So this is complicated, but the two main issues are whom do we allow in and for how long, and how do we preserve the Jewish state? We're only talking about, you know, 10, 30,000 people. We're not talking about millions of people, right? Because most of those people, if they don't have a connection to Israel, are going to go to Europe. They're going to go to Poland, they're going to go to Germany or whatever. So only people with an interest in Israel are going to want to go. So how many of those people do we want to let in? Does it affect the demography of the country? And then do we distinguish between people who are halachically Jewish or not, since the law of return is that all you need is a Jewish grandparent? So for purposes of this whole like deciding who can come in and who can, you know, become a citizen, should we base it on some law that doesn't exist? Because that's not the law right now. So I'm going to divide you up. Those in the sanctuary, please speak among yourselves, 3 or 4 of you at one time, and talk about it a little bit. You guys can talk about it, and I'm going to split up the people here. So if somebody from Zoom would like to share something that happened in their group, please. Oh, you're all muted. Yeah, you have to unmute to do that. Did anybody have anything interesting to say?
I do, Rabbi Singer.
Yes, Sandy, please.
We were talking about, you know, how do you prove that your mother was Jewish or your grandparents were Jewish? How do you do that?
Well, you have to, I've helped some people do that when they've wanted to make aliyah. You need a letter from your rabbi, or maybe some sort of certificate showing you had a bar mitzvah or a ketubah or something like that. And of course, given what's going on in Ukraine, it's not like people had time to take a lot of papers with them. But they're not being allowed to get on a plane unless they already have what's basically a visa. So it's complicated.
Well,
Does
aren't a
somebody
lot of,
here want to share something? Don't all talk at once, please. Okay, Dean, thank you. But you have to talk in the mic, otherwise they won't hear you.
Okay. What we came to a conclusion of is family and relations is just really, really messy. It's really hard to say, okay, this is the line that separates people. Wendy has family in Ukraine and she doesn't even know who they are, but she still has family in Ukraine. And when her family came over here, they came in, I hate to say different shifts, but at different times. So coming out of Ellis Island, they all got slightly different last names. So.
Okay, I was told that the fact that the names were changed at Ellis Island is a big fat myth, because I was told the same thing about my family. I'm just reporting back. Yeah, me too. No, my family came over also from Kyiv, and I was told that the clerk couldn't pronounce the name, so it was changed. But I've also read that that was a myth. So who knows? Because I'm going to show you another myth in a minute. Okay, anybody here have Ezra? You have anything you want to share? No. Wait.
I think we all just came to the conclusion that this is a problem of who is a Jew that's been going on for years, thousands of years. And it's a very difficult problem to solve, and Israel is going to have its say in it.
What about the issue of the demographics and bringing in people who are not Jewish? You didn't get to that. Okay. All right. Anybody on Zoom have something you want to add? Christine, you usually have things you want to say.
I feel so ignorant, but what we were talking about is, well, I could go on and on about blood quantum and all the rest of those issues in Native American communities, because it's basically some of the same issues. But and once you go down that route, you end up with this kind of biological determinism that nobody should have. Yeah. And so the question of, are you a Jew, it becomes a cultural question, inevitably, unless you're going to end up with blood quantum and messenger RNA and all the rest of that stuff, or mitochondrial RNA.
Yeah, let's get really technical.
The mitochondrial, no, that's a different issue. But what we were talking about is the whole issue of asylum and who decides. How do we know who decides? We didn't come to any conclusions. I mean, it was really,
can't.
it's so hard.
They're incredibly thorny questions.
Yeah.
And there's no simple answer.
Yeah, but I have, as an anthropologist, I had this one article, this one woman wrote a fabulous article on in vitro fertilization in Israel and how they were trying to establish that an egg or a sperm were Jewish eggs or Jewish sperm. So this is like insane, right? It's like beyond insane. I think that basically people have to understand that there should be a separation of church and state, and that the right of return is okay.
Yeah, good luck
that's
in
fine.
Israel separating church and state.
Yeah, I know, but that's the only way to make anything
Okay, Bill,
rational.
thank you. Bill Oppenheim, go ahead.
Go ahead. One of the discussions we had, I guess it troubles me. Yes, we need to watch who's coming in, but this is sanctuary. These are people's lives. Bring them in, let them in. They may move them out somewhere else in 60 days from now. But in the meantime, we need to save lives. Whether you're Jewish or not Jewish, we need to save the lives of these children.
Totally.
I agree.
Can't afford any more deaths.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. Thank you. I have a couple questions in the chat. Did they only accept Orthodox certificates? No. In Israel, again, you don't have to, technically, in order to make Aliyah and become a citizen, you need to have a Jewish grandparent. And if you have papers to show it and you have a letter from a rabbi or whatever, That's all you need. You don't need an Orthodox certificate. The problem is, if you're not considered halachically Jewish, in other words, according to Jewish law, you can't get married in Israel. Okay? If you don't have a Jewish mother, you have to go somewhere else to get married. People go to Cyprus, or if they're already married, that's accepted. And aren't most of Ukrainian Jews secular? According to the law of return, it doesn't matter if you practice the religion. It only matters if you had a Jewish grandparent. And that's the same with halachic, identity. If you have a Jewish mother, your mother could have never stepped into a synagogue, and that's good enough. Well, it doesn't make them happy, but they can't change the actual law. So it's very complicated, but I agree with Bill that right now there's a world humanitarian crisis, and I think we should just say, let's not cap it at 5,000. The 5,000 is for non-Jews, okay? If you're Jewish and you can, prove it, then you can come in and make Aliyah, and that's it. And I think the concern is demography, and we're not going to get into it, but that's also part of what goes on with the whole issue of the West Bank and the Palestinians. Thank you, everybody. I hope you had a fruitful discussion. So, mythology, right? The myth of going to Ellis Island and have your name changed. According to Dara Horn wrote a very good book called People Love Dead Jews. And it's a very glib title, but it's actually filled with very interesting essays. And one of them is about how that's a myth. I was always told that our name was changed at Ellis Island. Many people were told. So I don't know. So, let's just say you come to this synagogue and there's always a monitor on the floor here. So if you want to go over to the ark, you have to kind of squeeze in like this, right? So then one day, the monitor is taken away. But everyone's so used to doing it this way that they still do it like this, even without the monitor. And that's how things kind of become a culture or a tradition. Not that this is exactly analogous, but I already told a couple people in here. Eileen, I hope you're still on, because I noticed one day that inside the ark was a slotted spoon. And it says on here, leave in ark. And I'm like, why is there a slotted spoon in the ark? And what does it have to do with anything? Anybody have any ideas? We already talked about it, so don't say anything. Why do you think there's a slotted spoon in the ark? And when, the next generation would come and go, I guess all arks have slotted spoons, right? The reason is that Eileen, and we really miss you, Eileen used to set everything up before the service, and she's short and she couldn't reach the light switch inside the ark. I think this is the reason. Is that correct, Eileen? Tell me. That's what we guessed. Can you unmute and tell us? Where is she gone? I don't see her anymore. Uh-oh. Okay, well, whatever. I'll tell you about it tomorrow. So I think that's how that ended up there. And just for nostalgia, I'm gonna keep it in here. What's that? Instead of wondering where that spoon was. Okay, so I want to mention a few things that are coming up. This Sunday, we have a Purim Carnival over at Emmanuel. So please come. It doesn't have to just be for kids. If you want to bring your older kids, if you want to be your own child, please come. It's Congregation Emmanuel over on 4th Street. So that's from 9:30 till, I don't remember exactly, I think 12 or something. Yeah, so please join us for that. Then next Friday, we're doing a joint service with Emmanuel here at Temple Bethel, and it's going to be a short service and a Purim spiel. And Cantor Jennifer from Emmanuel has been orchestrating it. Are you both in it or just, yeah, you're both in it, and Beth is in it, yeah, and anybody else? Dean, are you in it? No, okay. So there's some people from here, some people from there. It should be fun. And what I'm going to do for the service is I'm going to do a backward service, because on Purim things are upside down. So I'm going to start with the end. Okay. If you're confused, you're supposed to get so confused that you can't tell the difference between Haman and Mordechai. You're supposed to do it with alcohol, but you can do it with a backward service. The following week, and I really encourage people to come in person, please come in person, okay, on the 25th. We are going to have Raymond Zachary, who is a soloist who's been here once before, and the band Mostly Kosher, which is a klezmer band. And it's going to be a really fun, very musical service. And really, you can appreciate it a lot more if you're here in person. Zoom does not do a great job of sound. It was never meant as a studio. You know, it was for conference meetings and stuff like that. So please try to come in person. So those are the main things coming up. Of course, we have a Passover Seder on the second night, which is April 16th, a Saturday night at 4. We're going to do it outside, and you've seen hopefully the flyer for it. So please, if you want to come to a second night Seder, sign up for it. Any other announcements? No? Up there in Zoom land? No? I want to thank, oh, yes, Lynn, I have to give you a microphone or no one can hear you.
I just wanted to remind everybody that tomorrow night, move your clocks ahead an hour.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we lose an hour of sleep, but we gain an hour of sunshine. So that's kind of nice. So I want to thank, first of all, Shia and Asher for a fabulous job. You guys are getting really slick at this. I think you have a new career ahead of you. And Nick, thank you for helping out tonight. And Jory and Morris, thank you for your beautiful, beautiful music, which you've gotten a lot of compliments in the chat. You're showing the empty sanctuary. See what happens when people don't show up? Look, is this pathetic? Okay, so next week in the yeah, you're there, but the whole other side is just about empty. So next Friday and the Friday after, please come in person. Okay, yeah, thank you for the panorama of emptiness. Okay. Mitch and Beth, would you like to open the ark for the Aleinu? You knew I was going to ask you, right? Okay. And we rise for the Aleinu, which is in the back of your prayer book because it's too complicated. You have to change pages 3 times.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, lated gudula leotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot hadama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, vanaknu korim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu, shehu note shamayim beyoser aretz, hu moshev yekaro bashamayim mima'al, ushchinatu zo, begovei meromim, hu Eloheinu einod. Emet malkeinu efesulato, kakatuv betorato, v'yadata hayom be'ashevota elevavecha, ki Adonai hua Elohim, bashamayim mimal, ve'al haaretz, mitachat einod. Kakatuv betoratecha, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed, v'ne'emar, v'haya Adonai, lemelech al kol haaretz, v'yom hahu, yiyeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad.
May be seated. And also, I'd like to thank Ezra Greenhouse, who did our security for the evening. Thank you for being here for doing that. Everybody was very well behaved. Good. Good job. So we take a moment to think of those who are no longer with us. May their memories be for a blessing. We offer our condolences to the family of Ruth Landis on the passing of Ruth at the ripe old age of 104. We're observing Shiva for Everett Allen Kaplan, brother of Elise Hayton, and for Teresa Wanacott, mother of Miranda Wanacott. Is anyone else here in Shiva Shloshim or the first year of mourning? Okay. Edith Tanizaki, first year, Elena Archibek Farris, Stan Walkman and Joanne Heslin, first year, Marge Groden, first year, Alan Pasternak and Myrna Pavelak, Sandy Schneider. We're also observing yard sites this Shabbat for Israel Abraham Held, William Sonny Solomon, Margaret Corlett McHiggins, Edith Lurie, Miriam Conklin, Rose M. Singer, Jean Maines, Ricky Andrews, Ralph Weinberg, Marion Brandler, Harold Cohen, Jane Blumenson Welke, Aaron Rinsler, Naomi Hoffman, Henry Prince, Rhoda K. Spiller, Nellie Rubian. Is anyone else observing a yard site? Of course, we think of those who perished in the Holocaust, those who've been killed in Ukraine. And please rise and join me in the Mourner's Kaddish, page 598. And it's page 598 in the big book. And let me just look. 294 in the skinny book. And please feel free to unmute while we recite the Mourner's Kaddish. Yikadal v'yikadash shnei rabah ve'almad yifrach hutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayachon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael v'agala uv'zman karev imru amen. Yehei shmei rabah mevarach le'olam u'almei almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yidromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei v'kudusha b'rechu La'ela min kol bilchata v'shirata tushpachata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba mitzvaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'iru. Amen. Oseh shalom v'roma v'huya aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'iru. Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved, as together we say, Amen. Please be seated for a moment. I'm going to ask you to mute again. So I got a couple of questions in the chat. One was Rose Weiss was a name that I missed. One question was the name in the book that has essays. The Ellis Island essay is just one. There are many other essays, but it's Dara Horn. It's called People Love Dead Jews. A little controversial as a topic, but actually quite good. There was another question somewhere. Harvey had a question. Oh, there's no Tanakh study tomorrow morning. It's next Saturday. I have a prayer that I have for Ukraine. It's by Hilla Ratzabi called We See You for Ukraine. Crowded in a subway station in Kharkiv, a student from another country clutches a dog to her chest, answering the reporter's questions as men rush down the stairs, interrupting the interview. Toddlers in snowsuits on blankets, teenagers head down to their phones, mothers' eyes looking everywhere. Zvieta says she grabbed her documents and cash. She has a car, but nowhere to go. As she speaks, a boy in a blue winter hat and black framed glasses, a few years older than my oldest son, peeks out from behind her, smiles shyly as he eyes the camera. A man stands behind him with his backpack pressed against his chest, holding himself. We see you in our living rooms, at kitchen tables, as we pack lunches and perform our morning routines. We watch helpless, holding your faces to our hearts as we tend to the small luxuries of the mundane. We fear from afar the brutal waste of war, the extravagant arrogance of power. We rage at the rage of men who refuse to see you, or rather choose to see through you and thereby refuse to see themselves. We see you, see the subway train stalled at the station, the indefinite pause of commute. We see you huddled from the thunder of bombs whose distance from you is incalculable, but near enough to tremble the heart. We tremble with you. From across the world, we hold you close, not with thoughts or prayers, but the presence of the heart, a commitment to witness, a dedication to peace. We see you, we hold you, we will not leave your side. And we end our service with a song for peace, Peace and End by Fripp and Sinfield.
I just wanted to say that I chose this song, which is not a typical closing song because it's kind of solemn, but I chose it. It's from one of my favorite bands, and it's about peace. And for the people in Ukraine, peace can't come soon enough. King Crimson. It's not a typical song of theirs.
Peace is a word of the sea and the wind. Peace is a bird who sings as you smile. Peace is the love of a foe as a friend. Peace is the love you bring to a child searching for me. You look everywhere except beside you. Searching for you. You look everywhere but not inside you. Peace is a stream from the heart of a man. Peace is a man whose breath is the dawn. Peace is a dawn on a day without end. Peace is the end, like death of the war. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. We give thanks to God for prayer. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Shabbat Shalom. May there be peace.